Well, you know, I mean, like, oh my God, yeah. Natural conversations can be awkward, they can be free-flowing, and they can be chock full of idioms and dangling participles. Mannerisms that don't exactly soothe the eyes or move the conversations of a story's dialogue. So, how do we stay authentic while providing that richness and allowing our minds to enter a flow state for our readers? While Mark Twain, William Shakespeare, and Irvin Welsh might not be the best for this panel, but then again, what they did with language was unforgettable. So is authenticity in the eye of the beholder? We will discuss. Then C.L. Cannon will be along with any books you might enjoy if you're a fan of Krampus, the Yule Lord by Brahm. And after the Go Ending Minute, we take an opportunity in Joe's last hosting gig of 2025 to show some gratitude in the epilogue. So, arg, batten down the hatches, mateys, because you know, man, like, I'm the dude. For This Week in Indies, with your host, Joe Compton. And as per usual, I didn't time it correctly, so you hear my coffee going off in the background. I apologize. But hello, everybody. Welcome to This Week in Indies. Yes, I am your host. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us. It's really nice to see you all here. Got some fourth wall breakers here. Vanessa, Lily, and then Sean and Anita are here. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. And thank you to my panel for being here on what is my final hosting gig of 2020. Well, my final This Week in Indies hosting gig of 2025. A.L. Mangle, hello. So why not talk about the thing that we're going to talk about, which is dialogue and how to write compelling and interesting dialogue. But before we do that, let's get everybody talking about themselves a little bit and have them introduce themselves. So Lily, start us off, please.
Hello, everyone. I am Lily Lucchesi. I'm a USA Today bestselling author of urban fantasy and paranormal mysteries. I also write dark romance as S.L. Sinclair and contemporary romance as Samantha Calcott. In addition, I am a developmental and line editor at Partners in Crime Book Services.
Awesome. All right, Ben.
Hi, folks. I am Ben Shankman, urban fantasy author, though I'm starting to branch out a little bit more. And I have my latest book out that came out October 28th. But otherwise, I'm an urban fantasy author and audiobook narrator, and I'm very happy to be here.
Is the guitar new, or have I never just noticed it before?
I think it's relatively new for here. Yeah.
My powers of perception not very good in the morning, so I apologize if it's been there before.
You usually see me in this window too, so.
All right, Tiffany, go ahead.
I'm Tiffany Vega. I am co-owner of Outsider Publishing Company. I am a multi-genre author. Wow. And words seem to be very hard for me today.
Words are hard.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's perfect for this conversation.
Words are hard.
Awesome. All right, Vanessa.
That's it.
Hey, y'all. My name is Vanessa Junta. I write urban fantasy, primarily write urban fantasy with horrific elements. This is book 1. What you see next to me, I think over there, is book 2 of my Soul Cavern series. I am also a professional fiction editor and have been since 2008. Words are hard, y'all. So I also host a show here called Conversation and a Cocktail, which is currently on hiatus, probably till January. And I'm involved in a number of conventions, and I also run a writerly support and education group on Facebook, Discord, and Twitch called The Writers Troop.
Awesome. Well, hello, welcome to our show, everybody.
And can I say, AL, that's not my house. That's because I'm not even going to go into it, but I need a background because I don't want you to see my messy office. So yeah, but you're welcome to come play on my fake piano.
Yeah, I think he knew that. He did. He does like it though. Yeah, it's one of those backgrounds that they give you to hide from. Yeah, that and the
I'm
brick
very
wall.
grateful for it. That's what I'm grateful for this year, y'all.
I'm glad you chose that one and not the brick wall.
My hair kept looking super funny in the brick wall, so I was like, no, that's not going to work for me at all.
All right. So as you can tell, we're already starting conversations here, but I want to kind of, I'm wondering what kind of precedent you set on dialogue. How much in the pantheon of things that are important for your storytelling is the dialogue for you? Is it something you spend a lot of time honing? Is it something you work on sparingly? Do you try and be as naturalistic as possible? How do you approach the aspect of dialogue, and where does it stand in your writing process? Anybody?
For me, dialogue is extraordinarily important, especially when I started writing under the Lily pen name, because I started in third person. When you're writing in first person, you have to remember it's pretty much all dialogue. That's just internal monologue. It's just not spoken dialogue. So it's very, very different. So when you're writing third person, you are not getting as much of the character's voice. You're following the character from, in a different point of view entirely. So when you're writing dialogue, you have to make sure, from the very first moment that character speaks, the reader knows who they are and they have a distinct voice. You have to make sure that they are introduced in a way that is going to show who they are, even if they change later. Even if, it's an unreliable voice and they wind up being, a different type of character, when the reader meets them, you have to make sure that first line of dialogue is going to be a fantastic first impression. It's like going on an interview. You want your boss to have the best impression of you. Same thing, you want your reader to have the best impression of the character. So when I started writing, I knew that certain characters needed a very distinct introduction. Like, you're gonna remember Angelica Cross basically breaking down Danny's door, not being allowed to be shooed away, like that sort of thing. It shows her personality right there, and the first thing she says to him, which is "Let me in."
Nice.
I think dialogue is for me it's super important. Like Lily was saying, it's one of the most important ways that you give your character their own tone. But I'll say, as far as like how do I set precedents for dialogue in my books, I get a lot of feedback that the dialogue and banter in my books is realistic and relatable, and I've taken that from a lot of the media and other authors that I've learned from. But I'd say my goal is to really set up a very natural sounding dialogue. There are ums and uhs and pauses and like the way that real people speak. And I know that's potentially going to be at odds with some folks' takes on dialogue, in that some people feel like if you make it too much like the way that people really talk, it's actually going to sound less realistic. And like there's a balance. But I would say I really want my books and characters to have a very natural, real sounding dialogue.
So I agree with everything that's been said. For me, my characters, dialogue is one of the few parts of writing that comes really natural for me. And the thing I love about dialogue is that you can convey so many things about your character from the beginning, just as Lily said, from the very beginning. You can set up who your character is in your reader's mind, or you can set it up so that the character has a misimpression. I mean, the reader has a misimpression of your character, if that's important to your story as well. Because, sometimes we want a character that looks like they're bad, but they're actually doing good, or they look like they're good, but they're actually doing bad. And dialogue can help so much in that, because the way they talk to particular people, the information they give or the information they don't give. I mean, to me, dialogue is one of the biggest pieces of characterization. So I find it incredibly important. And I love what you said about realistic dialogue. I don't like to put a ton of likes and ums and stuff, which I'm sure you don't use a ton either. We probably use more in speech than should ever be on the page. But I find that those things really help with the characterization when you're using them with intent and in a smart way. So I don't think that it is, I am not of the mind that you should skip over all those things. I used to be, but I'm not anymore, that you should not have any ums or likes or any of those things that we do to as filler in our dialogue when we're actually speaking to people. But I think they can be used really, really effectively to help convey tone and how a character's feeling at that moment. So
I agree with everything they said, but dialogue is also a very good way of showing what's going on instead of telling people what's going on. If your character has a stutter, stuttering their words in dialogue makes it where you don't have to put he stuttered, or and if they are from a different like say a Southern person talking instead of somebody that's from the West Coast, you can put different things in your dialogue that will say that without you saying he had a Southern accent. And it's a way to build character. You know, you can make a likable character likable and a non-likable character not likable in dialogue. I tend to start with all dialogue and then go back and then add in the things that need to be done on like the second, third draft with it. So I always start with dialogue. I know what I want my characters to say.
Cool. That's awesome. Oops, we got an echo.
I think it might be Tiffany.
All right. So the other Nettles is here. We do not know as of right now where the other Nettles is. He messaged me back and said, "Eck." I don't know what that means. But,
that means he forgot. That's what that means.
Where is he? Not here. Yep. Dang. Yeah. And A.L. Mengo says, I make an effort to have dialogue drive the story, no mundane random conversations that have nothing to do with the plot and slow pacing. We'll get into that in a little bit. I like natural feeling dialogue, and I have found dialogue can also help with description or sentences, edits. He makes an example there. Good God, that stinks. It smells like old garbage. All right. Dialogue fills the story in ways that push us away from info dumping.
Yes.
Great point right there. Yeah. And here's A.F. Stewart saying realistic dialogue works for great for contemporary. Historical dialogue is not as clear cut.
That's an excellent point.
I have books that go in the past and it's very difficult.
Yeah, we'll get into that as well. I want to get into the emotion of dialogue though, because I think y'all hit on it a little bit. The realism. I think that debate would have been a debate. And Vanessa kind of alluded to this about 3 or 4 years ago, right? I think more and more editors are coming to the realization that people want to hear imperfections in dialogue and things of that nature. I think that is coming.
Can I make a point to that? I think that has single-handedly been done by indie authors. Because I think indie authors put that in, and because we have control over what actually gets published, then the reading public is like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. That's so relatable, right? To use Ben's language, right? That's so relatable. And then the actual traditional publishing industry is like, oh, they don't say, oh, maybe we've been wrong all these generations, but they do say, oh, let's change things up a little bit and be okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But so that aside, and Jim's on his way in, everybody. So get your words in now.
Godspeed.
I'm curious about the emotional aspects, because some things look better on the page than they don't. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we tend to want to overemphasize emotions by making them capitalized, or utilizing punctuation that to an overt level, right, where we're really trying to make a point. And I'm wondering how you handle the emotional aspects of dialogue. Are you kind of looking for adverbs? Are you looking for? Are you using punctuation? How do you, make sure you're conveying the emotions without saying he yelled, or because I'm a dialogue tag hater, but that's just me personally. I know a lot of people don't share that sentiment, but if that's how you do it, that's cool too. I just curious how you all convey emotion mostly.
It's a mix of punctuation and action tags. It depends on the scene itself. It depends on if I'm third person or first person. With first person, I don't need much at all because it's already going through that character's head most of the time. So you already know the space that they're in. So but I mean, a very well-timed exclamation point. I was just editing a novella a few days ago, and it was really well done with the dialogue and everything. But there was one paragraph, it was like 4 sentences. And you already know this character was pissed off. And she finally just started yelling. And I highlighted it and I said, normally I would remove these exclamation points. They're absolutely perfect here because she has not raised her voice in 20,000 words. And this is the first time and you're really seeing that. So those need to stay. And that's not always the case, of course. But again, if someone's emotional, a good sentence fragment. I am an M- hater. I've always been an M- hater. I read a lot of historical fiction and I read a lot of actual classic fiction written in that time, and it's overrun with M dashes. And I've always hated
English language.
Okay, mental note: do not employ Lily as my developmental editor.
I mean, they're good when you have a sentence fragment. Characters, when they're emotional, they're cutting themselves off a lot, especially if they're in the middle of crying. But it also depends, are they trailing off or are they abruptly cutting themselves off with a sob? So do you want an ellipsis? Do you want an M dash? Do you want them to stutter their words? Are they scared?
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes you don't have to have that stutter. And I do like to put it in once in a while, like, who? And I like to use it more for surprise than fear. But the setting around it should set the dialogue. The reader should know what type of setting this is. They should know if the character is pissed off. They should know if the character is scared. They should know if the character is crying. The setting and the action tags, not dialogue tags. I don't like she yelled, she gasped. Like a good timed what should be very easy for the reader to tell how they are saying that word without you using it. Everything around the dialogue. That's why I don't like whole pages of dialogue. Like Tiffany, I actually write the dialogue mostly first. And then when I go through my self edits, I add in a bunch of prose. Dialogue comes to me. That's how the characters talk to me in my head. But they also show me what they're doing. I just get the dialogue down first. But if you're going to have a lot of dialogue on the page, you have to be a very, very great writer to convey all of those emotions because it gets overwhelming and then the reader has to do more work. You don't want the reader to do the work. You want them to be immersed. And immersing is action tags and short prose surrounding the dialogue. So they know, like, if let's say I had a character who was very frustrated, it was Danny in Stakeout, and he was pacing back and forth. And the dialogue that came after, you knew it was frustrated without me saying, he said frustratedly. Like, no, please. Also, yeah, no adverbs. You don't need the LYs. Get rid of them.
I'm gonna have to I'm gonna agree with some of the things that Lily is saying, but I'm also
hang on
gonna.
a second. Let me.
Oh,
just
sorry. Go
put
ahead.
something out real quick before everybody goes any further. And I should have done this at the beginning. I apologize, but you see where my finger's pointing up there at the corner. There is a QR code. Anytime somebody's speaking and I put them on the screen, that QR code goes to the book that you see corresponding next to them. So if you like what they say, click on their book and buy their book. That was Lily's book right there for everybody. And I'll put Ben's up here in just a second. I put Ben back. So now it's Ben's QR code. Now,
it's on that side.
So I just wanted to point that out to everybody real quick. Sorry about interrupting the conversation. Keep going, my friend. Please.
No, that's okay. And that's awesome. I really appreciate that. So a couple things. I have to respectfully disagree that it's easier to write emotion and dialogue in first person, because just because you're inside that person's head, like it locks you into the point of view, but it also makes it a little more difficult to show rather than tell sometimes when you want to describe like the physicality of emotion of a character when you're talking about that like interruption of dialogue. So like I agree entirely that long stretches of dialogue can get really frustrating, and I use a big mix of action tags. I do use some dialogue tags. I'm sorry, Joe, but you're wrong. And I use a lot of just and I'll use punctuation as well. I also use the dreaded adverb periodically. I'm going to just use an ly word there, because all writing advice that ends with "never do that" means except sometimes, and I disagree with the folks that say never to use an adverb, because all popular fiction from Stephen King to Brandon Sanderson is chock full of adverbs, even though they would tell you otherwise. But yeah, M dashes are actually a great way to convey the choppiness of a conversation.
Well, you just want to just punch everybody in the face to
Yeah.
the event.
Yeah, I mean it's how it is though. Like, so M dashes used properly, I don't care how many of them are in your book, as long as you use them correctly, are perfectly appropriate. And you can take the M dash, the ellipses, and the Oxford comma from my cold dead hands.
Me too, Ben. I am right beside you.
I will give my clients the Oxford comma if they don't have it. I will give it to them.
The M dash is for an interruption. If it is not an interruption, whether it's yourself or otherwise, it doesn't belong there. But dialogue, there's no other good way in punctuation to interrupt other than you'd have to either use an action tag or dialogue tag of like, he interrupted.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I'm going to use an M dash to show you graphically and physically that this cut off mid sentence. And so like, I get that we're in the age of the AI witch hunt when it comes to M dashes. So a lot of people are avoiding them, but I do not care one little bit and will use them until my dying breath.
As far as dialogue tags go, I just want to say real quickly, I'm not against all of them, just an overuse of them. That's more of
you have to mix it up. Like, honestly, dialogue and prose, everything gets boring if it's the same thing. And to make my writing read more natural, I will use a mix in that if a couple people spoke, and even though you know who's speaking, if I haven't done something else for a little while, I'm going to throw in some physicality. I'm going to throw in a dialogue tag just to be like, hey, in case you've lost track of who's talking, here's who's talking now. So like, it's all of the above.
I always tell my clients, action tags are your friend. Those are your friend. Those are the ones that can be used a lot. And as long as it's a different movement, they never seem repetitive.
Yep. So I'm going to be on that hill beside you, Ben, you and me. We're going to be taking this to our dying days. So I am also an M dash aficionado. And it's an interruption either in dialogue or in just a regular sentence, when you offset and in like almost like thought interruption or a note interruption. Anyway, M dashes are my friend. I love them. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit in terms of emotional aspects of dialogue, which was, what Joe originally asked about, because I can go down all these little, side roads. But for that, I feel like we're kind of all on the same page with this, is that you cannot, hardly any dialogue is effective if it's just dialogue. Like, you cannot disconnect it from the actions happening around the dialogue, because that, like, they work together. They work in tandem. Now, I guess as a mental exercise, you could probably do all dialogue and try to get all the emotion in there with just dialogue. And you could probably do it. But it is not common, and it is probably not even the most effective way to do it. So I don't think you can disconnect dialogue from, say, action sentences or even dialogue tags. And I do want to say, I want to make a note on adverbs, because as an editor, I don't have a problem with people using adverbs if they are using them correctly. And I honestly believe that the don't ever use adverbs in your fiction rule is because most of us use adverbs incorrectly on a day-to-day basis. And I illustrated this with one of my clients once, and we were able to get together for lunch to have our, client meeting instead of actually, doing it online or whatever. And so I was explaining, she had a sentence in her manuscript that said, she took the water and drank it gratefully. And that is not an appropriate use of an adverb, because an adverb modifies a verb. It modifies the action of a verb. And so she happened to actually have a water bottle there. And I said, okay, take a sip of your water. And so she takes a sip of her water. I said, okay, now take a sip of it gratefully. What is the difference that I can see in the actual action? And there's not, because grateful is an emotion and an action cannot have an emotion. So as long as you're using but something like he walked quickly. I mean, you can use a better verb for that specific thing, but as long as the adverb is actually affecting the action of the verb, then it is being properly used. So, and hardly ever do, especially with a dialogue tag like said, whatever, that is almost always used incorrectly. It almost is always used to show the emotion of the character and not the action of the speaking, if that makes sense. So that's just a little adverb lesson for folks if they feel like they need it.
I want to quickly build on the lesson, because one of the things that I had learned when I was learning, going through editing, taking the courses that my actual editor gave me, if you're going to do something that's out of order, like she laughed wearily, that can kind of go in a little bit, because you're not usually laughing wearily. Now, if you're laughing merrily, there's absolutely no need for it. If you're laughing wearily, it does sort of add to you reading the
if
dialogue.
it's not the default. It's the same way with, like, you don't need to say she nodded her head, because your head is what you default nod to. So if you're nodding with your elbow, then yes, note that it's your elbow. Exactly, Ben. So, but yes, if it's the default,
that's winging it.
Descriptor. What'd you say, Jim?
I said that's winging it.
Entering with a splash. Okay, I'm done talking now, and I guess it's Tiffany's turn. So.
I'm going to agree with Lily as far as like writing first person is, I guess for me, easier to convey emotion than it is in third person. And I really just figured that out because I just got done writing a book that actually Lily is doing the developmental edit on for me. And then I started to work on my second book in the Element series, and it's in third person, and I'm having a much harder time
shifting
emotion in third person than I am in first person, because I am noticing just from this conversation that I'm relying on dialogue tags to get what I want across, which I'm going to have to go back and change now. But
you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Much more work. And so I am noticing that writing first person is definitely easier for me, and it doesn't have to be that way for everybody. Everybody has their unique process of how they do things. But I do rely a lot on my editors for feedback on my emotion if I'm conveying it correctly. And learning from their experience on how to do that. And I'm sorry, Lily, because you probably
have a full report. We'll be ready by tonight. Full edit and full report. You're good.
May the odds be ever in your favor, Tiffany.
Oh, I sent her and said, this is the first time I'm ever writing a romance, so lay it on me. But I do rely a lot on my editors, and I learn a lot from them, giving me that feedback. Like, you can easily leave this off on. So it's a learning experience, and that's why I think it's also very, very important to have those people in your life that you can, say, hey, does this sound correctly? Is this, the right way, to make it realistic? I mean, nobody gets it right the first time or the second time. You know, it's a learning process, and you just have to learn from those mistakes. And because dialogue is such an important way to convey the storytelling, it is important to make sure that you are learning those lessons of what is correct and what's not correct to get your point across.
All right, Jim Nettles, everybody.
What? Just gonna show up late, tech issues in the middle of a meeting that ran long. You know, it's just that kind of morning. What are we talking about?
Conveying emotion in dialogue. How do you convey emotion without doing all the things that we've been talking about?
And in my own stuff, I won't say bad habits, but I tend to write with a lot of actions going around the dialogue. Whether it's small fidgeting, whether it is, big things like this, I tend to have a lot of action, not a whole lot of the dialogue tags of he said, she said, unless it's I need the pace to pick up or it's just two people sitting there back and forth. But I tend to have a lot of action going on to convey a lot of the emotion, right? Is somebody fidgeting to show they're trying to look confident, but they're fidgeting to look, so they show they're nervous. Are they, is it the hair twirls? Is it the little things that show aggression and things in tone? So yeah. So I use a lot of action in around that. And the other thing I use is a lot of kind of internal monologues, right? If it's first person, that's a little bit easier. You know how you feel, you can only project what they're doing. In third, you've got a little bit more latitude to have that projection of what somebody doing, a little bit of that internal monologue. But that's really probably the way that I do most of it, is having those things that are actions, because I tend to observe that. I look at a lot of that in my normal day-to-day. So it's not only about what somebody's saying, what are they doing in the process, what's happening at the same time. So that's where a lot of mine comes from. Now, I am also on the hill of I will die with my M dash in one hand and my Oxford comma in the other.
Yes.
Spear and sword, right?
Yep.
You pick whichever one. I use both of, I will die on the Oxford comma. I use M dashes somewhat sparingly depending on what the case is. Because I usually use that to show that hesitation, that pause, that stop, or because somebody's just trying to catch themselves or whatever's going on, or somebody's being interrupted, the things that where people step on each other. So I love it. I use it. No, I don't care about if you're looking at everything else I'm doing and saying, well, that came from insert your favorite LLM here, then I have bigger problems.
Got a bunch of comments here. People want to chime in and get into the conversation. And let me get to the right spot. A.L. Mangle says people don't speak grammatically correct. Correct. Sorry, words are hard. Show statements linked to the line to a line of dialogue. Adverbs don't work well. Adjectives are always better. Okay.
From the English teacher.
I obey my editor when it comes to correct emotional punctuation, tags, and dialect.
Anita's a good author.
Yeah, you just know that there's a bunch of editors in here, Anita. That's why you.
I let them. She's very enjoyable to work with as an editor.
I like clipped sentences to show rage. This is because that's how I communicate rage. There are no rules, Ben. So there you go. Everybody's on your side there. Each of our voices are unique.
It's true.
And then Jessica says, exactly, people talk over each other, interrupt, and move during dialogue. All of these things are useful. That's a lot tougher to convey the talking over in a novel. In movies, they've kind of perfected it, but screenplays, it's a mess. Reading a screenplay where people are talking over one another, it's really difficult to read that. But when you see it on screen, it does. They've done a really good job of layering that. But in novels, I haven't seen too much of that. I don't know if we just avoided it or if it just
it's hard to put, like, when you're doing it line by line, it's hard to put two lines on top of each other.
Yeah.
So it has to be really kind of like rapid fire interruption.
I've seen like
and I'll end it with like they said at the same time. Like I'll put one line, and then two characters, character A, character B said at once. And I won't do more than that because that gets way too confusing. But it does help when you're writing your dialogue if you sit there, because everything plays out in my head like a movie. The characters are up here. Everything's up here. It's full everything. So if you're picturing it like you would if it were a movie or TV show, how would you want that written? How would you want that read? And again, you don't want to do that too much because even when someone's speaking over each other, it's very mind-boggling. It's very overwhelming, sensory. And you don't want to give a reader a sensory overload. That's why most people read, because they don't want all of the extra input.
I know this is going to upset the formatters in this group, but I have seen it where they've actually formatted it where one paragraph's on the left side and one paragraph's on the right side, and they're talking on the same time. I've seen that before. That's the only way I've seen it done. Actually,
that's kind of how text messages get formatted for print. But like, sorry, can I just introduce people to a concept if they aren't aware of it, that I think is what we're talking about. There's a word for it, and as a tri-state area Jew, I figure it's my responsibility to introduce cooperative overtalk. Which is the process of having those layered conversations where multiple things are being said roughly at the same time. And that's actually just a cultural thing, especially in like the Northeast Jewish community. That's just how we do. And God help you if you are in a room with us when that's happening. And I cannot imagine like you mentioned for a screenplay, it's a mess. I can't imagine. It would just be a never-ending stream of M-dashed phrases, because that's what it is. It's just one thing after. So like, it's giving me heartburn thinking about trying to write a cooperative overtalk conversation, but that's roughly what it would look like.
My family does the same. Yeah, Italian. Yep,
they're the same. And I remember inviting my friend over once when I was a teenager. And he turned and looked at me. He's like, "You're part of 3 different conversations with like 6 different people." I'm like, "Yes."
Yep. Yeah.
And it just gets louder.
I find I'm doing that at cons, at bar cons often.
Yep. And I think it's interesting because I do think I agree with Jessica. Jessica says that is also a Southern thing, and it is in a slightly different way. But like, I grew up in Chicago, and although I have Italian, like my dad's side is Italian, I didn't grow up with his side. I grew up on my mom's side, and we did that too. The big difference I found between the Italian side and my mom's side, who are like German Irish, is that Italians absolutely get louder. As they continue to talk, they get louder. And we tend to keep like the same general tone unless people are getting upset. But Italians don't have to be upset to get louder. We just get louder. We can't help it.
I've also been asked. I had my friend pull me aside once. This is a different friend, not the first one. She's like, "Why are you guys arguing?" I'm like, "We're not arguing." It's like, "But you're getting louder and louder." No, this is how we talk.
It's hilarious.
I wonder.
A lot of Italians in like family conversations for that reason. It's difficult to convey that. Very difficult to convey how we actually speak in a large group
and how chaotic it can be. But everybody's still on all the same pages.
I wonder if anybody's tackled the drunk Irishman or drunk Scottishman talking aspect of writing, because
I feel like that's
got to be very difficult to write.
It might have crept in a time or two, yeah. But if you really want an interesting exercise, is to record actual conversations, play them back, and then look at the pacing of the language and words, whether it's somebody giving a speech or talking, or you get the dialogue of a room full of people and then map that when words happen, when they occur. It will teach you a lot about how we actually communicate versus what makes sense on a page, or even what makes sense on screen.
I would never
because
want to record an Italian's conversation because they might not trust you, and you might not end up leaving that party.
look,
You will be
Like
the
I-
centerpiece of the next gathering.
Yes.
that's why you just accidentally tap that record button on the phone.
Oops.
And then put
Oh,
it
This
in
is
your
not
pocket.
admissible to court.
You went a wire?
Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Are we going to talk at all about the dangers of things like phonetic accents and
Yes.
whatnot? Okay, then I'll hold my commentary for that.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. We can go into it right now if you want.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a battle that authors have to wage with themselves, and like I a friend of mine who just published her debut novel had a character with a Cockney accent, and she made what I feel is the absolutely correct choice in lightly accenting the dialogue while describing the character upon meeting as having a thicker Cockney accent, because the reality is it is a danger to overly phoneticize an accent. And it's better to use regionalisms and other things and idioms. So like, again, if you're in the South, it's going to be y'all and bless her heart. If it's
And fixin' to.
yeah, fixin', it's ends with the little apostrophes at the end. Like, and for British and Scottish and whatnot, it's going to be idioms and like in it and but
And crack on.
even going with for a Cockney accent, ths can become f's, and like you don't actually want to write I think, because like think is a different word and it means different things, and it's confusing to people and like screen readers and audiobooks, and it's one of those things where I think it is a danger that authors don't understand when they feel like they're doing a clever thing by overly accenting their dialogue to represent an accent, and you have to be careful about that.
That's why I mentioned Irvin Welsh in the beginning, because if you've ever read an Irvin Welsh novel, you know how frustrating how frustrating it can be to read that, because he doesn't sugarcoat that at all, especially in Trainspotting. There's a section in the book of Trainspotting where literally Roddy Doyle said he couldn't translate it, and Irvin Welsh said when he talked to Irvin Welsh about it, he was so drunk he doesn't remember writing that, and so he's like, well, what do I do with that? And he goes, just cut the scene. You're the director. He's like, okay, I'm just going to cut that scene. It was kind of a pivotal scene in the book too, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it was so badly because they were so high. They were talking gibberish basically, and it was like, and he kind of there's a scene in the movie where they're meeting in a club, and that was another scene that he had a hard time translating from the book, because it's awful to read in the book. It's really difficult. That he's one of those that doesn't forgive, doesn't have any give when it comes to that. He'll go straight for the Cockney accent, and he even writes Gaelic in some of his books, which is just like impossible to read.
Guilty of that one.
Cockney would be difficult.
Mine too.
Yeah.
But one of because Ben brought up regionalisms, and trad publishing is usually actually pretty bad with doing way too much to show an accent. And I know the picture is going to pop up. Stephen King, he writes. There's always at least one character in his books, and
You
it's a
ask, you
signature.
shall receive.
I knew it was coming. I already knew. Those characters, and they have the little, like the little accent, and he doesn't do too much of it, and it's always just that little. He writes it perfectly. He is absolutely. If someone wants to talk about regional accents and how they can be written in dialogue without going overboard, I would tell them to read especially his older work, because he used to do more of it then. I would tell people, I don't care if you don't like him, I don't care if you don't like horror, read for the characterization, because he aces that, and he always has. And I think that's one of the reasons why he was so difficult to publish in the 70s and got so many rejections, because trad publishing has never done it that way. They always want it overdone, especially back then. Now I think it's changed a little bit. But and he is something that I took writing my characters from Chicago. I'm trying to speak very, very clearly. a lot of Chicagoans, especially North Side, we do not speak clearly. We run our words together. We miss our T's, we miss our G's, we miss some of our
And
A's.
you talk fast.
Out. We speak very quickly.
I
have to show
Linguistic
that
condensation.
in my paranormal detective series and in the Santini family series. These are Chicago Italians. And they're also Chicago Italians in defense attorneys and working with the police. So, I mean, there's a very specific way they speak. So it was very difficult for me going through because it's like, oh yeah, nobody's going to understand anything if I actually wrote it and spoke.
That's where you don't want the dialogue to be accurate to real life.
I can relate. I can relate to that, having been in Ubers in Chicago and hearing somebody from the North Side talk and going, "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that."
I have a cousin who talks so fast that even I have trouble understanding her sometimes.
Me and my friend, we leave those voice notes. It's like, I mean, I think to myself, if I had to actually put these in dialogues, like James said, if you go and record real conversations, there's absolutely no way to do that. It won't work.
Just one more quick thing, because I think it's talking about Stephen King, but talk about a character. I think it's a great example is imagine if Harry Dresden was written with a Chicago appropriate accent, the book would be unreadable.
Oh my God. Yes.
To get through all the rest of the Jessica says, I find that I use adverbs to gloss over deep description possibilities.
Joe's trying to bring us back to the topic, y'all.
What was the topic?
My brain works that way, like a movie. It is tough. It comes from screenplay writing. Yeah, I know. I'm terrible when it comes to that. I have to retrain my brain every time I write a novel or novella. I could train one eye on the left paragraph and the other eye on the right. Okay, wow.
When we were talking about having them next to each other.
And dialect is a minefield. Yes, it is.
For real.
Another great minefield is the Indie Connection, which we will mine right now through. And you may or may not see somebody from this panel on that connection. I managed to mention that somebody had a book related to this topic in this group. And I mean, you'll know it when you see it. But that is our Indie Connection for this week. And then we're going to come back and talk about history and talking about historical dialogue like was mentioned earlier, because that's kind of a fascinating idea too. So we'll be right back with that. And in the meantime, here's your Indie Connection.
Hey guys, C.O. Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press, bringing you another Indie Connection. And today I'd like to tell you about some indie books that you might enjoy if you're a fan of Krampus, the Yule Lord by Brom. The first book I have for you is called Krampus, Creature of the Yuletide by Neil Lachman. When Alistair October had a stroke of luck and hit the jackpot in the lottery, he bought a house far away from all the troubles of his daily life. His luck was on a roll when he closed the deal on a stunning house atop a hill in the beautiful Alpine region of Switzerland for next to nothing. Burdened by the guilt of leaving his family behind, Alistair used his newfound wealth and took his family on a mini vacation halfway around the world to his new house for the Christmas holidays. His good fortune, however, came to a frightening halt when Alistair and his family learned the haunting reason why the previous owners hastily vacated this beautiful home. This led to Alistair and his cousins, James and Ravi, discovering the harrowing legacy of their family when the unholy creature of Yuletide descended upon them the night before Christmas. The second book I have for you is called Krampusnacht, 12 Nights of Krampus, by various authors. For bad children, a lump of coal from Santa is positively light punishment when Krampus is ready and waiting to beat them with a stick, wrap them in chains, and drag them down to hell, all with St. Nick's encouragement and approval. Krampusnacht holds within its pages 12 tales of Krampus triumphant, usurped, befriended, and much more. From evil children and adults who get their due, to those who pull one over on the ancient Christmas devil. From historic Europe to the North Pole, to present-day American suburbia, these audio stories embark on a revitalization of the Krampus tradition. The third book I have for you is called The Three Sisters, The Krampus Chronicles, Book 1, by Sonia Hallback. 14-year-old Maggie Ogden thinks she knows everything there is to know about grandfather Clement Clark Moore and his legendary poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." All this changes Christmas Eve, 1854, when Chelsea Manor receives an unexpected visitor, Henry Livingston. A young man searching for evidence to provide his grandfather, Major Henry, is the true author of the famous holiday poem. The night takes a strange turn when Maggie and Henry come across another intruder in Chelsea Manor. After following a peculiar boy down a secret opening within the fireplace and through an underground tunnel full of mechanical sleighs, Maggie and Henry discover Popple, a hidden village under New York City. Faced with the deadly challenges presented by the legend of the Three Sisters, Maggie and Henry are forced to play by Popple's rules and those who run the cursed village. And they quickly learn that not only is leaving Popple harder than arriving, but there are even more dangerous lies and mysterious truths to Clement Clarke Moore, Christmas, and the menacing creature Krampus that anyone could have known. The last book I have for you is called The Krampus Clause by James P. MacDonald. All Gabriella wanted was a quiet Christmas with the family. Now there's a monster on the loose. 10-year-old Gabriella's brother is a jerk, and his best friend and their neighbor is worse. Daddy has just brought home a Nancy in the Nook doll that's even creepier than the Ned in the Nook, and all she wants is to protect her backyard domain and survive gymnastics. Now grandmother is visiting from her Austrian village to visit for the holidays, bringing heirloom decorations, her famous Stalin recipe, and a family legacy. When her grandmother gives her a special gift, will she use it to save her brother or follow an ancient power? Okay, that's all for me this week. I'll see you next week on the Indie Connection. Bye!
As always, thank you for that great indie connection. 'Tis the season, so get your Krampus books out there and enjoy the holidays and Yuletide and all that wonderful thing. I won't go Roll Tide for Bob, but we'll Yuletide for Bob.
Right? Roll Tide.
They rolled right out of the playoffs yesterday, so good job, Bob. But anyway, that being said, I wanted to kind of finish up our conversation a little bit with talking about writing historically and capturing that essence of dialogue. Obviously, none of us here want to tackle a full-on Shakespeare, or maybe somebody does here. I don't know. Maybe somebody's ambitious enough, but something to that effect where you're in a regional setting or somewhere along the lines when some words didn't exist or they meant something different back in the day when you're talking, or as we've alluded to, certain regions have certain ways of certain things that describe other things, right? But in historical context, I'm curious how you've handled that and what you've discovered about writing dialogue in a time period.
Well, I've actually, in the Paranormal Detective series, it will bounce back between the 1800s, Regency era, 1800s, Victorian era, Edwardian era, and then it will also go into present day. So when I do that, I did have to pause sometimes, and I did have to go back and fix my dialogue because sometimes my brain is not going to that sort of speech. And I'm actually quite familiar with especially Regency and Victorian dialogue, as I read books that were initially published back then. Those are some of my favorites. So it's not that it's difficult for me to write it. It's difficult to make that switch. And it's also difficult to ensure that the flow stays the same. That's something that I think a lot of people don't realize is dialogue flow is different. It's not just the words chosen. It's how they're spoken, how long those sentences are. I mean, even just to be polite, in modern day, it's hello. Back then, if you only told someone hello, they thought you were shunning them and were going to kick you out of the, latest farm gathering or whatever they were doing, depending on what the setting was. You have to stop and have one thought becomes a whole paragraph. That's why older books were longer, because people were just naturally much more verbose. I say as I speak, right? Especially internal dialogue, very, very verbose. So you have to ensure that the flow is not interrupted if you are doing something that does switch back and forth from past to present. Whereas if you're just writing a whole book, it's easier to get into that flow and stay there.
Well, one thing for me that you have to be careful. And the funny thing is, it isn't just historical fiction. This also applies to fantasy. If you're, especially like for people writing epic fantasy, where they're going for that kind of more heavy Gothic feel to the dialogue, the thing that will take me as a reader, that will take me out of floral dialogue that's intentional, is modern idiom, and especially things like swearing. I have a friend who tends to write their dialogue and throw in like smattering of modern words and idiom, things that would be anachronistic in the setting. So like, even if you're just writing straight up fantasy, if it's evoking a medieval feel, having someone say ass, like, is that right or is it not? And it's going to change the tone of what you're looking for. So like, I think one of the biggest things to give dialogue a more historic feel, besides like all of what Lily was talking about, makes absolute sense. Longer, more verbose, more formal language, and avoiding idiom and anachronistic language that takes people out of it. And I think that's probably one of the ways to do it. The other thing I will say that I wanted to throw in somewhere is the best thing that I do to make sure that my dialogue feels natural is I read my books aloud. And I don't mean having a screen reader or Word read it to you. I mean, you literally read it aloud. So find someone who wants to hear you, or read it to your cat, whatever you want. But you have to read your stuff aloud, because if you're going for a Regency feel, and it isn't about how Mr. Darcy sat upon the shelong, and instead, like, he parked his butt on the sofa, like, you're gonna read that aloud and be like, oh, that doesn't sound right for what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Only Matthew Barry can get away with modern idioms in a traditional setting, right?
I agree with what everybody's saying, and it's really, though, it's a fine line, right? You have to walk a really fine line, because it has to feel authentic to the time period, but it also has to be palatable for a modern reader. And a modern reader isn't going to tolerate some of the things that were common in fiction of that time period, if there was written fiction, because there was time where there wasn't. But like modern readers have a much shorter attention span, and they like a little more white on the page than just the ink, right? So they want more white space on the page. They get bogged down sometimes, not all readers, of course. There are some readers who love that. But that's the whole thing, right? You have to find a balance. Also, I +1 everything folks said about like word choice. And Anita says something really smart in the comments, where she says sometimes even historically correct words can feel modern. So you have to watch out for that too. And that is 100% true. And the words can have really different uses and meanings. I mean, take the word fag. Like, in America, particularly modern America, it is absolutely a pejorative outside of the gay community. But in the UK, a fag is a cigarette. So, like, understanding how language changes over time is part of our job, I think. And so that's things you've got to really watch for. I don't write a lot of historical stuff, although the current book I'm working on has a magical thing that is set in the golden age of piracy, late 1700s, early 1800s. And so it's going to be like, I'm really looking forward to kind of delving into that, because I like that time period anyway. So anyway, I just babbled. I don't know if any of that was useful to anyone.
I have to follow up with that, because Ben mentioned the word ass. Ass was used way back then, but it wasn't used for the body part. It was used for a donkey. So
For
if
an
you're
animal,
saying
yep.
your ass was on the sofa, no,
That's really odd.
Like
Your little donkey's on the sofa.
have your character walk into a room in the 1800s and say, "Mother, father, I'm gay." Back then, it was going to think happy. Like, and the parents are going to be like, "Is he drunk? Why is he saying he's happy?" Whereas, me walking up and going to my mom, "Hey, I'm gay," meant I like women. And that's very different depending on modern and then. So yeah,
and back then, did people even come out to their parents? Not usually. No. They usually moved to an entirely different town in order to
so much research on LGBT in the Regency era. It's incredible. And there was no such thing as coming out.
That's right. There wasn't. And they were roommates. Ben, y'all can't see it. Ben said that in our chat. But yes, that's exactly right. So yeah, that people did not come out then, and for good reason, right?
Jim, Tiffany, you guys want to jump in?
Well, go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I have a Viking story that I'm working on. It's a second part of York's Curse, and I had to look up the proper term that they would use for a penis because they wouldn't use that term back then, and just little words that we take for granted that we say now are not words that people used, in the 1700s, 1800s. So I have a whole list of like Norwegian words that for meanings that we use today. So it's a lot of research when you're writing like historical dialogue.
Yeah, because I get a mix of it because like there's a piece I wrote, a couple of the Western pieces I wrote like they were probably written in the 50s or 60s about the Wild West 60 years earlier, right? So you play with some of the language over the times, and what are you trying to emulate? Are you trying to emulate the pulps of the 50s, 60s for that reader, or are you trying to emulate the historical aspect? There's an alt history that is being revived. Publishers got it now. We'll see what happens. That is written very much in Victorian English, but I've got characters that are from Victorian England, some that are from the East Coast and some from the West Coast. And this is set right at the turning of 1900 in the West Coast. So you've got plus you also then have Chinese coming over here that are working on
the railroads,
working in the ports and all along there. You've got a lot of languages and stuff from a very particular period of time. With some of the more urban fantasy playing with the gods and things like that, I've got some of them that they'll poke their head up every century or two just to see what's happening. And so the language they'll have picked up 200 years ago will be mixed with the language from 1,000 years ago. And what does this word mean now? Or how do they communicate? So sometimes you get to have fun with those kinds of an idea as to people that are, from much longer periods of time. When you think about somebody like Count Saint Germain and that Vanessa and I just did show on, but when you look at some of those things over time, somebody who is adapting to the time continuously is still going to have some idiosyncratic language choices from their history, right? We all adapt our language over time, but there's a lot of fun things you can do with language, like misuse a term, use it like it would have been used 100 years ago, which has the exact opposite, meaning today. Things like that to create tension, contentiousness.
There's a really good example of this currently. The Gen Z and Gen Alpha especially are using raw dog for something that my generation has an entirely different definition for. When they say raw dog in it, they do not mean what I know that word to mean.
That brings up a good point. I mean, generationally, are you very careful about dialoguing? When a grandfather's talking to a child, kind of idea too. That's something that you have to be careful of as well, right? When you're talking about language, and is it okay? This is a curiosity of mine. Is it okay to explain when the grandfather doesn't understand a word in your writing? do you find that's as a reader? I would find it a little disconcerting because one, I don't think the author trusts me to be smart enough to figure that out. But two, I would think also it might be helpful if it's something that I don't understand, generationally. What do you all think about that idea?
So
I think
For most
go
of
ahead.
that, I would say Google is your friend for some of it. Just you should have to look up, but if it fits the character, if he's talking to an older person, that older person is probably known not to understand what it is. So I think it's okay if it's in character. That's when you have to be very situational about it. Like I have it in the Coven series, in the Coven Princess. Harley's very new to the Coven world and she doesn't understand. They've got some weird idioms, which I did usually have to make up to, get rid of curse words because it's YA. But, she has her boyfriend call her up and he's like, I can't go out with you today. We have gnomes. And she pauses and she says, is that a disease? Because he has to explain to her what he means by we have gnomes, which no, it's not a disease. It's a burrowing creature in their gardens. So I think it is situational. It can also help you if it's fantasy. It can also help you with world building with a word that a character doesn't understand. When it comes to slang, just make sure you keep it in character. This is one of those times where there is no hard and fast rule. If these are characters of the same age talking to each other, no, don't explain it. If there's a huge generational gap, I think it's fine as long as it fits and doesn't take away from the story and take you out of the plot and the scene.
Yeah.
So my thought on it is that you work it into the dialogue and just to what Lily just said, if they're of the same generation, but they're using a word that is generationally appropriate, but you still think your readers might not understand it. The trick that I do, and this goes for other things too, is you have one of them say the word, and then you have the other one respond in a way that clearly defines what that word meant, even if you don't define it. So, like just as an example, but it's a noun. So I'm writing a book right now. It's the second book in this series, and this creature says, "Oh, I'm a domovoy." And the character doesn't go to a lengthy description of what a domovoy is, but the main character says, what's a Slavic house spirit doing in my apartment? Because I'm not going to define what a domovoy is, but I'm going to use the dialogue to continue building the world of what this means. So, it's like if dialogue between two Gen Zers and someone said, go off, King. And then the other one's like, yeah, and they go off. Like, we don't have to define that because you've made it clear what that means.
That's a much nicer example than what popped into my head. And what popped into my head was, yeah, that's rad. Yeah, I like it too. That's what I.
Yeah, but that's it. It's like, wow, that was rad. Yeah, I thought that was awesome. Also,
Yeah. And I'd also say, like, specifically in your example, Joe, when you're talking about like a younger person talking to an older person or vice versa.
Yeah.
Not all explanations are actually for the reader. Yeah. Sometimes it is for the characters, because it shows the reader what the character does and doesn't know. And it shows us kind of what generation they understand and what parts they don't understand. So it's like the explanation itself is not necessarily always for the reader. Sometimes the explanation is for the character that then shows the reader something else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and if you're playing with the fish out of water scenario, that becomes a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah, I was going to agree. Say what Vanessa said. Sometimes it is showing the difference in the age gap, and so you don't have to explain it. It's just that person saying it is building that other person's character, that story arc. You don't really have to explain what it means.
Yep.
And Nina says, yeah, immortals have some interesting leeway with language. So there you go. Yes. All right. So let's get into the Go Indie Minute here. This week we've got a wonderful show. I want to mention real quickly, yesterday we dropped a new Saving a Seat episode. Those are the 3 movies that we actually, this is the new one. That one's for this week. Got the wrong graphic. Well, we dropped a new Saving the Seat. Go check it out. We got 3 great movies. Those are the 3 movies that we got for this week, weekend's show. As you can see here, we've got, I'm joined by Bob Magoo on Monday for 21 Grams. That's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about southern cryptids and utilizing that darkness in fiction. So, and what a meth wizard deals with on a daily basis in fiction. So, We'll talk about that on 21 Grams. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern on Monday. And then Tuesday, Juliet Rose, her penultimate episode before the season ends. She has Constantine's. I'm sorry, Constance. I'm not gonna say your last name is Kouagamatis or something like that. But it's a beautiful Greek name. But he's a really great author, a really great kid, and he's put out his first book. So they're gonna talk about how he's been experiencing his first book and how it's gone. So that'll be on Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and then on Wednesday, our own Lily Lucchese has stepped into the ring to take on A.F. Stewart, debating, and stepping into the ring is an appropriate idiom for this conversation because it's going to be talking about instant fighting skills, that wonderful trope that we all despise or love, depending on how you look at it. But they will debate the merits of that said trope. That'll be at 8 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, and then immediately following that is myself and Brian Tan with Working the Indies, where we have figured out and debated. We also debated who we believe is the indie wrestler of 2025, and you'll hear that conversation and learn who we've crowned as indie wrestler of 2025 as far as Go Indie Now is concerned. And then Brian Tan and myself again will be back on Saturday to do the Saving the Seat that I just showed you right there. Those are the three movies that we talk about, and they're very interesting, and it's a very interesting conversation, and you won't want to miss that as well. That is everything that's going on in Go Indie Now land. We're headed toward the end of the year, and we've got a lot of great stuff mentioning. I want to mention really quickly, too, on the 21st of this month, we will be doing our Year in Indies, where we will count down my favorite 5 books of 2020, indie books of 2025, my favorite top 5 indie movies of 2025, Brian Tan's favorite, and also Sean Hillman will be joining us to do his favorite and his unveiling his 5 favorite indie games of 2025. All right. For the epilogue this week, since it is my final show of 2025, I thought we'd do something a little different. And I will start it off so that you all can think about this. And hopefully you've been thinking about it. But, 2025 has been a shit year. It has been terrible. For a lot of us, we've been through a lot this year. We've all been dealing with how our world is crumbling or going through whatever it's going through. And it doesn't look like things are heading
get better anytime
soon. But that being said, practicing gratitude and understanding that you have to find internally the gratefulness of what is for you something, because not everything is shit. Something good can occur. And for me this year, it has been all of you. That is my gratefulness to. I could not do what I do here without any of you. For those who guest on my show, for those who host my show, for those who produce things, I am really super grateful to each and every one of you this year, because this year was a lot of juggling for me and trying to figure out how I'm going to do certain things for 2026. And so this gave me a good blueprint of how to go forward for next year, because next year, my plan personally is to put out more personal things for myself, some more writing, I have a novella, I have some novels, I have hopefully be making a movie next year. That's something we're talking about, maybe even doing at least a short film next year, which I know I've been talking about for the last couple of years, but I am focused on moving that forward a little bit more. So for me, 2026 is going to be a defining year of personal goals and reaching personal goals. So 2025 was a really good blueprint of how to manage that and keep this going, because I do want to keep this going. I love doing this. I love our channel. I love our community. And so I'm really grateful to each and every one of you for 2025. Thank you so much to all of you in the chat, everybody who comes and hangs out with us, and everybody who does our shows and is a part of it. It really means a lot to me. So I'm very grateful for all of that. So thank you so much to all of you. All right, Lily, I'm going to start with you. What are you grateful for in 2025?
You didn't give me a minute to get over the fact that you made me a little emotional here, did you, Joe? Okay.
Sorry.
So 2025, I actually had one of the best summers ever away from publishing, and we called it our K-pop summer, my friend and I. And then after the summer ended, my health started going downhill, and I have a bunch of new things that I need to take care of. So I've been kind of miserable a lot lately. But when I did get the email, this is going to be about gratitude, I've been thinking about it, and I am so grateful for this writing community. I'm grateful for the friendships I've made, the relationships that have gone outside of the writing community and are now personal. For the people who are more prolific than me sharing their knowledge. That's how I've been able to build. And that's the book that you see next to my face. That's my Kickstarter. And Kickstarters are usually very, very hard. There's the QR code. They're usually very, very difficult to run, especially when you don't have a lot of time and energy. And I don't have a lot of time and energy. And I've been able to hit an incredible goal with this Kickstarter. It's very small to some people, but for me, it's so huge. And I just have so much gratitude for the people in the writing community that have allowed me to keep going, from my clients to my readers, to the people I've taken courses from, to Joe and Sean and everybody here who keeps me coming on, rambling. I realized how wonderful this community is, especially this year, especially feeling like death, especially stepping away from it for a few months over the summer. I'm just very grateful for everyone, for sticking by my side, for those of you who are standing up for marginalized authors. As Joe said, this year has not been great in America, and you guys are all amplifying our voices, and it's very heartwarming. It's keeping me going in the cold months.
Nice. That's awesome. All right, Ben, what are you grateful for?
I am very grateful for the entire indie author and just indie artist community. I don't think I've been in a lot of community spaces over the years, and I think since becoming an independent author and narrator, I have not found a more welcoming, supportive, and just fantastic community of people. And I've said to my partner, back up one second. Interpersonal connections, friendships, and family are one of the big things that's gotten me through. But I'm a big found family person, so that includes a lot of the indie authors that I have met and befriended over the last couple years. And I've said to my partner that being an indie author, it has become one of the most fulfilling things that I've done. When it comes to my hobbies and avocations. So I'm thankful for everyone here, everyone that I've met and worked with, everyone who cheers each other on and works together. So yeah, I think for 2025, it's people in this space that are, punk rock enough to create while the world burns is what's getting me through.
Nice. All right, Vanessa, what are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for a couple things, and a little bit's going to sound broken record-y, but it's been a really rough decade for me. So this is just the toilet paper on top of the shit cake. But this year, I'm grateful for my mom's medical team. My mom's cancer came back, and we went through radiation and stuff again. So I'm grateful for them. But also, I mentioned at the top of the hour that I run a writerly support and education group called the Writers Troop on Facebook and Discord and Twitch. And I am super grateful for them. And many of the people in here are part of that group. And there's a lot of overlap between the Go Indie Now family and the TWT family. And I have to say, it's been such a rough couple years. And the fact that my people, my writer people, are there, and I do certain things, I run sprints and things like that, and doing those things and seeing those people that show up and are there and working and inspirational and all of that. Like, I'm trying to really get back to my writing. I've been working really hard the last couple of weeks to try to get back into it. And just the people in my life, in the writerly community in general, is there. You guys are just inspirational to me. And I do also want to give a special shout out to Sean Hillman, because he's had a super shit year and he is like my right-hand human for TWT and for just lots of local writerly stuff. And he has been pretty instrumental in, he probably doesn't even realize it, but he's been very instrumental in kind of helping me stay on track. So shout out to everybody, all y'all. Joe has been incredible in always keeping our community together. And y'all, I'm just gonna cry. I'm sorry. I'm done.
I will second Sean Hillman. I could not be here without him. So Sean has been really, really grateful. I'm really grateful for him because he's not only has he done a lot for Go Indie Now, but he's done a lot for me personally, and he's
Same.
one of my best friends, and I'm really, really grateful for him. So thank you all. But thank you for saying that, Vanessa.
Of course.
All right, Tiffany, what are you grateful for?
Y'all made me cry. But I am grateful for obviously all for you. But really, I want to say is that I am grateful that I got the opportunity this year to actually produce the book that is right here. It's Rights at Risk. And I am lucky to have the privilege and the voice to fight against what is here. If people don't know, this book right here is a charity anthology. We are making our first donation in January to help elect women in office that are willing to fight for women's rights. And it is something that I hold near and dear to my heart, obviously. But there's a lot of people that don't get to speak up, and this was our opportunity to show and stand up for what we believe in. So
I love that. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm grateful.
All right, Mr. Nettles, what are you grateful for, sir?
Well, I have to pile into Sean Hillman just a little bit, knowing that everything he's gone, and of course, you, Joe, and everybody here. I'm grateful again that we continue to be able to do stuff here. The stuff we continue to do with Continual, things that I've been working on for several years that have taken longer than I would like. 2025, I think, is set up for some things to really be able to launch here coming up. So 2025 has been 24, 20. Well, all right. Last few years, have been challenging, but I think there's a lot of things that are finally we're at the point now where things are going to be able to start launching. I can start talking about them again. Stack of books and stuff that have all been sitting there waiting to come out. Hopefully, will be coming out through new publisher. So there's just a ton of work that's been going on, which I've been just sort of buried down and, dug in the hill and, stuck my hobbit toe in the air every once in a while. But that's probably the biggest thing, because I cut back on the number of events I was doing this year because of some other stuff I got pulled into. And so that's really what I'm looking for, is what 24 and 25 are probably going to enable me to do for 26.
I'm grateful that you came in here even 25 minutes late, my friend.
Yeah, well, 20.
We kept your seat warm.
Yeah.
I felt the flamethrower. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I just want to mention real quickly, too, Tiffany mentioned the charity. I want to let you all know how much you've impacted a community this year as well. I've got Jim on the screen. You can look at Jim. Jim's prettier than me. I just wanted to let you all know how you've impacted what you've done and what you've been able to do here with Go Indie Now, because you watch our shows. You do provide opportunities for us to put a little money behind what we do here. And because you did that, especially during a time when I was putting out stuff that is related to multiverse, we were able to this year make a donation that I just actually gave to the Trevor Project of $121.37.
Woo!
So you all did that. That was not anything I did, not anything I gave. You all managed to take watch what we did and interact and continue. You continue to do so. I want you to all know that you made an impact, and I'm grateful for all of you doing that for that cause, because it's a wonderful, wonderful cause. And that was a charity for Multiverse this year, and so we're really grateful that we could contribute and help out in that respect. So congratulations to all of you, and thank you. I'm so grateful that you all are here, and come back next week for Sean. Sean will be here to close out his year. And with that being said, it's always time to go indie now. Bye,
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, guys.